Hello everyone, it's April, and that means that Dark Falls Dalian releases this month. While thinking about what kind of video I wanted to make, obviously a run of DF Dalian would make sense. But considering as this quest isn't out yet, I figured I'd talk about the ultra hard difficulty standing party quest instead. Or I'll just call them for the rest of this video ultra hard bosses, because that's a bit of a mouthful. For those unaware what these quests are, they are essentially a type of boss quest with moderately harsh failure conditions. These quests usually have a 5 death limit and must be cleared within 15 minutes, which actually isn't too bad assuming all players have recent gear. The death limit at first can be punishing, but once you learn to fight, you will practically never have to expend all 5 deaths. As of now, there are 4 of these quests: Dark Falls Interception, Sign of the Planet Breaker, the Battle at Halfia Lake Part 2, and later this month, Planet Breaker Blitz. Now, obviously, since I mentioned something about gear, let's actually talk about it. Usually in a 4-player scenario, assuming everyone has current gear, which in this case would be a full set of Inea armor of any type, with LC logs, and maybe a trio capsule if you're feeling a bit spicy. The average player is likely to have around 150 to 160% on average. For weapons, either having a fluid guard or rare weapon is also likely all you need, of course, at plus 80 enhancement level and pot level 6. A fix-up would be nice, and it's pretty much free now to get fixed to level 1 thanks to the preset level 1 in the swap shop. Just having this gear isn't enough, of course, as you'll also need with any of these bosses a minimum DPS during the fight. For Solus on release, it was 3,200 or so minimum DPS, and for Malignant Aegis, it was around 4,200 minimum DPS. Having the DPS meter on, which can be turned on in the settings, is also highly recommended to gauge where you're at in most bossing instances. Now obviously it's very likely that content can be cleared with much less, as Malignant Aegis was actually cleared with Argenti weapons and Efficient units in a 4-player instance. But most players likely aren't going to be able to pull this off in such gear at launch, assuming gear will even provide enough battle power. With gear talk out of the way, let's talk about problems with these quests. First off, these quests, despite their difficulty compared to other content, usually have subpar drops, making them mostly not worth running beyond the initial clear. Solus had pretty much nothing unique to its drop pool at launch aside from 2 unique, extremely rare weapon camos and 1 Starro soul per clear. That was pretty underwhelming and barely anyone really farmed as a result. Aegis had practically the exact same loot up until it was given more modern loot post-rare weapon release. Prior to that, all it really had were melee weapons compared to Solus. Finally, we have Dalian, which is gonna go... Finally, we have Dark Falls Dalian. Dark Falls Dalian will have his own unique weapon series, which will drop specifically from that quest, which is the Wingard weapon series. However, later, as in next month, they will release a quest of the 4-player version, which will likely have the same loot. Usually, the rates for these weapons are extremely low, so don't get your hopes up. Next up is overall scaling. 4-player scaling, despite what others might think. Yes, I'm referring to that one guy I saw one day in area chat say MDFA was overtuned. These quests have extremely lenient 4-player scaling. The only reason you will likely fail is if you pug, due to pugs having vastly lower skill and sometimes also gear than what is usually required at launch. This makes pugging a bad idea, and finding like-minded people like alliance members or friends to run the content with much more worth one's time, as you will be more likely to get a clear this way. Anyone who says the quest is too hard in a 4-player situation is likely under-geared or isn't capable of improving or adapting or is still learning. The real problem comes from soloing this quest. To most, there is absolutely zero reason to do this, and that's because there really isn't a point to do this unless you're really trying to push your skills to the limit. More often than not, this does turn the fight into a massive gear and skill check, as solo scaling in the past has not been very kind through these quests. Of course, it's also more than possible to solo these quests on level and has been proven time and time again. However, just in general, the scaling is not in the player's favor, which can be moderately frustrating, as gear plays a huge factor in meeting the DPS requirements solo. For reference, when it came to Dark Falls solos, you need around 5,200 DPS minimum, and for Malignant Aegis, you need around 7,200 DPS solo. That's a lot of DPS needed. Now, with all of that out of the way, you're probably wondering, what are my thoughts on the content? Simply put, I enjoy the ultra hard bosses because they feel genuinely fresh, and there's really nothing else in the game that comes close to the thrill or excitement of clearing the content for the first time. I remember when I got my solo Muslim Ages clear a month or two back, I was genuinely happy to accomplish such a feat. It's true that content isn't rewarding in terms of loot, but there's still some level of satisfaction gained from clearing it, which I think is great. If the two things could be balanced out more, I think it would benefit everyone, and finally give players a good enough reason to finally start improving at the game. These fights are mountains to climb, and they certainly feel good to finally surpass, be it clearing it with 3 other friends, in a duo, or in a solo situation. My hope is, of course, that the Abdalian when that releases has reasonable drop rates, so that on top of being fun to clear, it is also worthwhile to run. Of course, I'm not going to get my hopes up, as historically that hasn't been the case. That's really all I have to say in regards to these quests, however. You've still got plenty of time to prepare for them, and there's a new 10-star series releasing when the seal gets updated later this month. So if you haven't already, be sure to prepare. Let me know what you think of these quests in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what others have to say about these quests, aside from the problems about loot. That being said, take care everyone and have a good day.